Ben Johnson is doing a good job of getting out in front of the stories that could be some kind of drama or just distraction for the Chicago Bears. From Caleb Williams' ESPN report about how he felt about the team to some changes to his footwork in the shotgun that were controversial for a previous Bears quarterback.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to bring you the latest from Ben Johnson at the beginning of Chicago Bears OTAs, where I think he very wisely addressed the ESPN Seth Wickersham story about Caleb Williams and his disinterest in coming to the Chicago Bears initially, and just some of the reputational things about the franchise that Ben Johnson is inheriting. I think he handled it in really the exact way you'd hope a coach does in this situation. He also provided some details on a key change to Caleb Williams' footwork that there were question marks about in the past, specifically with Luke Getsy instructing Justin Fields to do something similar, and Fields turned out to not really like it that much. But I think this method with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams feels a little bit more natural and a little bit less forced, and we'll kind of talk through what that might mean for the quarterback. And finally, Ben Johnson also talked about the Tush push and why he's not a fan. And after the NFL agreed not to ban it just yet, I want to kind of go through his thoughts on it and what the Detroit Lions opted to do instead that we should then see for the Chicago Bears. But this is the first time we've heard from Ben Johnson or really anybody from the Chicago Bears since Friday, when ESPN published the article with quotes from Seth Wickersham's book about how, Caleb Williams didn't want to be drafted by the Chicago Bears. His dad didn't want him to be drafted by the Chicago Bears. His dad said that Chicago is where quarterbacks go to die, and all this stuff, right? All this drama surrounding the team that hasn't really seemed to be a problem since Caleb was drafted, but certainly was a big whirlwind going on behind the scenes in the lead up to draft day. And this has the potential to linger as an ongoing story for this Bears team. And it will linger a little bit, especially until we actually hear from Caleb Williams himself. But I thought Ben Johnson did a good job, unprompted, at least the first time, about getting out in front and kind of just laying it out there and saying, listen, I talked to Caleb Williams about this, and we want to leave the past in the past and move together in the future. But really kind of downplaying that, hey, this doesn't have to be that big of a deal, and everybody's doing just fine.
It's come to my attention that the quarterback's been out in the media over the last week, and just to get out in front of that a little bit, I just wanted to say I wasn't here last year, and so I can't speak too much in terms of what it was like before he got here and when he got here last year. But from my 4 months on the job, he's been outstanding to work with, and we just are focusing on getting a little better every day.
I think when you hear it uttered, as in from the article, from the upcoming book, that Chicago is where quarterbacks go to die. Like, from a distance, did you see that? And what do you think when you hear that?
I love it. I love the opportunity to come on in and change that narrative. That's where great stories are written. And so we're looking to write a new chapter here, 2025 Chicago Bears, and looking forward to the future.
So I think this is one of the first early tests for Ben Johnson from a head coach, face of the team type of challenge, right? Not a X's and O's play caller challenge, but hey, you're in charge of this organization, or at least, the public face and voice of this organization, even above the players. How do you handle when there's some kind of less than ideal noise surrounding your team? And it feels to me like Ben Johnson handled this with public relations 101. This is generally how you do it. And of course you could go back through and tweak certain words or certain sentences. He could have said more or whatever, but I think he handled it really well. That you have to first of all come out and address the elephant in the room, right? You can't just pretend like nothing's going on or downplay and say, this isn't, we're not going to talk about that because it's not a big deal. You have to say, listen, this is a thing, and here's what happened, and you be transparent about it, as transparent as you can without damaging anybody or putting out any information that you don't want to, but to say, listen, yeah, that was in the past, and I can't control what was in the past, but ever since I've been here, everything's great, and we're looking forward to everything continuing to be great. Like, step one is acknowledging the problem. Problem's even a strong word here, right? But acknowledging the drama, acknowledging the issue, acknowledging the story, and making it clear that, like, yes, we see this is real, we're not hiding from it, but also it's really not that big of a deal, and here's why. And then part two of that is leaning into it, right? When there's criticism or a problem or something along those lines, when Caleb Williams' dad Carl says this is where Chicago goes to die, you can either resist that and say, oh no, well, what does he know? He's just a dad, he wants to protect his kid or whatever, or you can lean into it and say, yeah, bring it on. I love it. And that's such a confident, secure response to say, yeah, okay, that's what we want to fix. That's what we want to change. That's what we're here for. That's what I'm embracing. That's what I'm enthusiastic about. Like, seeing every trial and tribulation not as a challenge, but as an opportunity to do something more and to do something greater. And because he's right. At the end of the day, that reputation for the Chicago Bears is not at all Ben Johnson's fault, and he had nothing to do with it. So he can't control that. All he can do is come in and say, wow, wouldn't this make the story even cooler if we do turn this around? Because the plan is always to turn this around, and they're going to turn it around either way. So would you rather come and have great quarterback play where they've never had good quarterback play, or come and have great quarterback play where they've always had great quarterback play? Like, if he was going to coach, I don't know, like the Green Bay Packers, right, where they've had Rodgers and Favre back to back, like it's less impressive if Jordan Love is also good, because it's like, oh, well, they've had other great quarterbacks. Clearly, there's an infrastructure there that has been supporting great quarterbacks. So it's like less impressive to get good quarterback play somewhere where they've had a lot of good quarterback play. But it becomes that much more impressive for Ben Johnson if he does it here. And he was trying to do it here anyway. So for no additional work, he gets to get more credit and more popularity and more adoration for being able to do it here if he's able to do it here. Like, he doesn't have to change anything, and it makes him that much more important. So I think that's a really great way to handle it. You can't run away from it. You can't deny it. You can't, try and ignore it. You have to take it on head on, acknowledge it, be as transparent as you can, and then lean into it. And that's the kind of thing that I just don't know that somebody like Matt Eberflus handles quite that well, based on how we saw him run this organization in the past 3 years. And it's a good early test for Ben Johnson, and a sign that he's ready for this head coach role and the duties that he never had to really deal with as an offensive coordinator before this. Like, this is a head coach specific responsibility that I think he nailed really well. We're also getting a sense, though, of some of the more offensive coordinator type duties that he's doing at OTAs right now, including a significant change to Caleb Williams' footwork, one that it feels significant because of how this played out in the past. One slight differentiation of which foot is forward is another thing, but Caleb Williams going from right foot forward in shotgun to left foot forward. Sounds small, but can be a big deal, but maybe shouldn't be as big of a deal as I think we are all ready to make it after past experience. So we'll take a look at what they're doing and what Ben Johnson says about it and what Caleb Williams' involvement has been in all of that process next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in, because when you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Because you might be able to put your job in front of people who might not be actually actively looking for a job, but hey, if you're scrolling on LinkedIn, you come across an opportunity, you're like, oh, maybe I would consider a move, even if it wasn't something I was actively seeking on my own. That's why 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. They've got features that help you write job descriptions and quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So if we get into more of the football aspects of OTAs, one of the changes that we're seeing early on for Caleb Williams is an adaptation of his footwork. And it sounds like a small thing, and it sounded like a small thing the last time this happened to a Bears quarterback, but then it ended up turning into a larger thing, and that's kind of why I wanted to take some time to address it now today. But the big news, which doesn't sound all that big, is that when Caleb Williams is lined up in the shotgun, typically a quarterback will essentially always have one of their 2 feet will be slightly forward from the other foot. And last year and in the past, Caleb Williams has been a right foot forward quarterback, and Ben Johnson is having him work as a left foot forward quarterback. And if this sounds familiar, it's because this was the same change that happened when Luke Getsy came in for Justin Fields' second season and switched him from a right foot forward to a left foot forward quarterback. It's something that was part of that Green Bay Packers offensive tree that Luke Getsy had came from, and it's been part of some of Ben Johnson's experience. And we'll hear Ben Johnson himself in a moment talk about how, it's not like there's one perfect way to do it. He's kind of seen it done both ways and seen a lot of different perspectives on this. So it's not to say like he believes this is like the end all be all must be done this way, but there's clearly a sort of agreement here between both Caleb and Ben Johnson that are both on board with this. This isn't Ben Johnson dictating Caleb's got to do it this way. It's them sort of working together to find what's going to work best for Caleb. And so it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Okay, which foot is farther forward than the other? But it's really the foundation of the entire rest of the quarterback's drop back once the ball is snapped. And I want to get into the nitty gritty of that a little bit here. But first, let's hear Ben Johnson. And I should say on the front end of this audio clip, the question at the press conference was asked by a friend of the show, Nick Moriano. But in the video of the press conference, you can't hear Nick's question at all. I tried turning it up as much as I could, and you still couldn't really hear him. So I edited it out. I didn't want it to sound like I intentionally edited out Nick asking the question. So all full credit to a great question for Nick, noticing the footwork and being able to ask Ben Johnson about it and getting some good answers.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it a number of ways in my time in the league, and really over the last few years, I've kind of gravitated towards that. It's something that I feel pretty strongly about. He and I talked about it, the reasons why we want to do it. I think it helps out certainly with the quick game from the gun, and then helps us be in a little bit better throwing posture for a lot of the other things that we're asking him to do. So when we talked about it initially, he was already kind of exploring that himself. So it wasn't so much us telling him to do it. It was more a mutual, let's see what this looks like. And I think he's taken a knack to it.
How do you go about changing somebody's habits that they've had their entire career to, okay, this is how we want you to stand. The feel may be a little bit different. The actions may be a little bit different, but the result has to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we've asked in all these guys right now. They're all doing some things a little bit different than what they've done in their past, whether at this level or in college. You're learning, you're growing. They are getting uncomfortable with it. I go back, when I was young, someone told me it takes 21 days to learn a new habit and let it get in your unconscious. I don't know if that's true or not, but the good news is this. We had 3 or 4 good weeks on the grass with him in phase 2 and that prior mini camp that we were able to get ahead of a lot of that. And he did a great job in the downtime, just going ahead and taking it and running with it, and when the coaches weren't around as well. And we're not talking so much about the feet and the footwork anymore with him, and it's more big picture plays, routes, ball location, coverages. It's more big picture stuff now.
So again, normally a slight change of which foot is forward wouldn't sound like that big of a deal. But it became controversial with Justin Fields and Luke Getsy, where at the time Getsy came in and seemed to be kind of forcing Fields to change his footwork in this way. And certainly Fields, was willing and agreed and, willing to do what the coach tells you. And if you trust him, then it's going to make you better. But it sounds like Caleb is a little bit, like Ben said, like Caleb brought some of this on his own as an idea of like something he was interested in doing. So it's not purely just a coach dictating to a player, but sort of an agreement of, hey, this might be what's good for me. But then after Justin Fields left Chicago, and I think it might have even been, I don't remember the exact time. It was either after Getsy left or after Fields left. He was kind of quoted as saying, like, I wasn't really comfortable with some of the footwork things they were asking me to do there, and has since gone back to being a right foot forward quarterback in the shotgun. So like there can clearly be a disconnect here between quarterback and coach. I think there was a period of like sort of mocking Luke Getsy for having forced Caleb's left foot forward. Now, it's worth noting Jared Goff in Detroit, left foot forward quarterback, and there are a bunch of other quarterbacks. I don't know the exact number, but there are other quarterbacks around the NFL that are left foot forward quarterbacks and have a lot of success with it. Because to sort of oversimplify the difference and why it matters is because dropbacks are all about rhythm of the steps, right? You hear people talk about a 3-step drop, a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop, etc. And when your left foot is forward, you're able to get through that drop back just a little bit quicker. It can speed up the process because when you finish your drop back and are going to step into throw, you're always going to be leaning into your back foot, which for a right-handed quarterback is going to be the right foot, right? When you're ready to throw, your right foot is planted and then you lean into your left foot to generate the momentum. And so if you are starting with your left foot forward, then that means on your first step, you could plant your right foot and throw it. Whereas if your right foot is forward, then you have to go right, left, right to be able to throw it. But with your left foot forward, you can go left, right. Like you can get a full step, like a half step ahead quicker by starting with your left foot. Because then if you want to go, left, right versus, right, left, left, right. I mean, you're always adding, because you're starting left instead of right, you're always one step further in the order of getting to the plant foot to throw the ball. So it can speed that up even just a little bit, like that fraction of a second of one foot being forward can accelerate your drop back and help you then get the ball out quicker. Now, is that the difference between being a great quarterback and a bad quarterback? Absolutely not. But if it's a little thing that helps Caleb be just a little bit faster and he can be a little bit more comfortable with it or whatever it's going to take, like if they're both on board with it, then it's absolutely a good idea. And it's something that has worked for Ben Johnson's quarterbacks in the past. And I think Ben Johnson deserves a lot more benefit of the doubt that this is what's right for Caleb Williams than perhaps what Luke Getsy deserved as benefit of the doubt, given that Ben Johnson has a much more proven track record of quarterback and offensive success than Getsy did. As much as we were optimistic about what Getsy could do, it was a little bit of a wild card, and seeing what he would do with running his own offense under Matt Eberflus, and maybe a little bit in over his head on some of that, as we saw with the Raiders as well. But Ben Johnson, he's got the goods. So even if, even if it's sort of the same type of instruction that Luke Getsy gave and that didn't work for Justin Fields very well, or wasn't Justin Fields' favorite, does not automatically mean it's not good for Caleb Williams and isn't going to be Caleb Williams' favorite. It seems to be that they're approaching it from a more collaborative and everyone on board and buying in standpoint here that I think can be a good thing. It's something we'll keep an eye on over the course of the season and over the course of Caleb Williams' career and how well he sticks to it. But it's a sign of like showing you how intentionally they're, I don't want to say rebuilding Caleb Williams' mechanics, because didn't have to tear it all down and start from scratch, but refining Caleb Williams' mechanics in a way that is visible and intentional, and not just this idea of like, sort of a vague idea of like we're cleaning things up, but what does that really mean? Well, here's a very concrete example that we'll be watching over the course of the season here. Also want to be watching over the course of the season here how the Bears handle short yardage situations, because that was a struggle at times last year with Eberflus and Waldron and Thomas Brown, etc. And Roschon Johnson was kind of the go-to back there, but sometimes they'd go to the QB sneak, and sometimes they go to the Cole Kmet QB sneak, and sometimes they go to the Doug Kramer handoff at the goal line, right? The Bears were always trying a bunch of different stuff. And in comes Ben Johnson, who says he's not a fan of the tush push, despite it not yet being banned by the NFL. So we'll hear Ben Johnson's thoughts and his explanation for it and what we might see from the Bears offense in those situations instead next on Locked On Bears. I promise this is hopefully the only tush push talk we ever have to do on this podcast, because it can be a story that's, a little bit more played out in the national media, and we get tired of hearing about it on, insert favorite sports talk show on television, on ESPN or wherever. Like the tush push debate, I'm not here to have the real tush push debate conversation that you've already heard, 10 other times from 1,000 other people who aren't who are varying levels of qualified to talk about it. But because it was not banned, it was natural to kind of ask, hey, new coach, new team, new situation. Like, could the Bears be a team that dabbles in that? Since it's not banned, is that something that this personnel could fit with, given some of the bulk the Bears added on the interior up front? And Caleb Williams certainly isn't afraid of, trying to get a little down and dirty in there and gain some yards for his team. Well, Ben Johnson's not a fan. We're not going to see the tush push this season from the Chicago Bears, but it's not for the reason you might expect. Part of the idea for the vote on this was supposedly about player safety, although there hasn't been a lot of concrete evidence of that, more anecdotal evidence of that. But that's not Ben Johnson's concern here, although it is worth noting, I think the Bears voted in favor of, actually, I don't know where the Bears voted, so I don't want to misquote that, but clearly the Bears never seem to have a super strong opinion on it, and Ben Johnson's opinion is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek here, but I still think it's informative to what we can then expect instead on 3rd and 4th down situations with 1 yard or less to go.
What are your thoughts on the tush push? It's going to stick around. They've tried to, or group of teams tried to overturn it. The vote did not pass.
Man, I tell you what, does it become an explosive play ever? Have you ever seen a tush push become an explosive play?
Does it become a first down or a touchdown?
Yeah, I like explosive play. I like big plays. So I'm not a big tush push guy myself.
So, I mean, he's not wrong there, right? The tush push is not an explosive play, and he should prefer explosive plays. I think that's not a bad approach, and he is right in the sense that, like, I've seen other coaches say, if the game you're playing comes down to whether or not you can convert 1 4th and 1 play, then you've got bigger problems, because you should be able to win and be successful enough on offense that it doesn't come down to a 4th and 1 tush push play. Like, whether it's banned or not shouldn't be the difference between you winning and losing a game, because you should just be better than that and not be a team or a player that's so reliant on that play of really any specific play, especially a play like that's not an explosive play that generates big game-changing moments. I know, like, converting a 3rd or 4th down is a big moment, and they tried to push back on it. But I was looking back at last season for the Detroit Lions. If, like, okay, you're not going to run any tush pushes, how are they going to convert some of those down and distance situations? And I will say, looking back at the numbers and the data, Jared Goff looks to be 5 quarterback sneaks all of last season. He really didn't run any, like, read option plays. I mean, of all his rush attempts last year, he took 15 QB knees, 5 QB sneaks, and then 1 broken play that he just kind of had to down the ball himself because the play was blown up. But 5 QB sneaks for 6 yards was not a great track record, but they got over a yard per carry on QB sneaks. But then in those short yardage down and distance situations, again, 3rd and 1 or less, 4th and 1 or less, David Montgomery was their go-to option there. They would give it to Gibbs sometimes, but David Montgomery, I think, had like 15 or so of those types of carries. They weren't afraid to just line up under center and pound up the middle and trust that, hey, this offensive line that is kind of the strength of your offense can be the difference up there. And I think that's the intention then for the Chicago Bears this season, that you don't want to be predictable and say, hey, every time we're in 4th and 1, we're going to put in Doug Kramer and hand it off to him on the goal line. Like that. You don't want to make it so obvious that, well, we've got 3 tight ends on the field and a fullback, so we're running the ball up the middle. And Ben Johnson would do, like, pre-snap motion on some of those QB sneaks and some other stuff to just throw some window dressing for the defense to not be 100% sure where the ball was going in those short yardage situations. And I think that's kind of all you can ask for from Ben Johnson, right? Like, even the tush push itself is not a 100% effective play. Teams found ways to stop it. And so you have to have other tools in those situations that aren't gadget trick plays, or, God, you remember when the Bears ran like a wide receiver reverse or like a speed option at the goal line? I mean, stuff like that, you don't want to get too clever with it or too, overly creative with it. It's just about making stuff either look the same to defense and then you do something different on offense, or making things look different to the defense when you're going to try and do the same thing on offense in that situation. So I would expect that, we'll see how the training camp battles play out, but I would expect we'd see a lot of Roshan Johnson and maybe a lot of Kyle Monungai, depending on where he fits in the depth chart. Like DeAndre Swift, probably not going to get a lot of 4th and 1 situations. I would expect they probably won't go to the Cole Kmet pretends to be a quarterback under center and you QB sneak it to your tight end. I don't see Ben Johnson as that type of guy to take it out of his quarterback or running back's hands, to trust it in a player who doesn't normally take snaps under center. Like, I don't think Ben Johnson's going to get too cute all that often. I think it's just a matter of sprucing up what it looks like so that maybe you have 3 wide receivers in the field so there's not as many guys in the box in that situation. Or maybe you make it a run-pass option so that if there's 9 guys in the box and you got one-on-one coverage for DJ Moore or Rome Odunze, that you can pull it and throw it, like to give your quarterback options and to give your offense options so that the defense always has to be ready for multiple things and not just everyone in the stadium knows who's going to carry the ball and where they're going to carry the ball. And that just makes it harder to be successful, especially when it's not a tush-push play that at least has been a little more successful than a lot of other situations there. So I think we'll see some Caleb Williams QB sneaks sometimes. I don't think that's going to be the answer in every short yardage situation. I think we'll see some Roshan Johnson sometimes. We may even see some Kyle Monungai sometimes. DeAndre Swift, even Jahmyr Gibbs got some 4th and 1 carries, so he'll get it occasionally too, and it's just about keeping it fresh and keeping it different for the other team. I will say a couple other quick OTAs notes. Ben Johnson keeping it fresh and different, yelling at Cole Kmet to line up properly when guys were making mental mistakes, and they're not afraid to say, hey, you're a veteran and a leader on this team, but you got to be better. Everybody's got to be better, and getting in guys' face. That's a good sign of a coach establishing himself and making sure that, his message is heard and there's a balance there. But I think he's doing a good job of holding players to high expectations without being a jerk. I think that's kind of the lane you try and carve out there. Second round wide receiver Luther Burden dealing with a soft tissue injury or some soft tissue stuff was the way Ben Johnson phrased it. So he's missing some time at OTAs along with a bunch of other players. Nothing to be really concerned about. It's OTAs. If they're feeling anything but 100%, they're not going to force them out there in practices that aren't as meaningful as stuff in the regular season. And then one little footnote to tuck into the back of our minds, save it for a rainy day. Defensive lineman Daniel Hardy. It's a defensive end the Bears had on the practice squad a couple years ago and then was a part of this rotation last season. I think he had come over from the Rams in 2023, bounced around a little bit. The Bears are experimenting with moving this defensive end to linebacker, not inside the defensive tackle, because Daniel Hardy's listed at 6'2", 240. So he's not that much physically different from say TJ Edwards, who's 6 foot 242. Edmonds is 6'4", 250. Daniel Hardy's a bigger linebacker for sure, but he's a great special teams player and an athlete who can cover on kickoffs and punts and stuff. So they're still leaving him at pass rusher because they think he's got some value as a pass rusher, but they're going to keep experimenting with Daniel Hardy at linebacker because he is a little bit smaller than what Dennis Allen has typically preferred at defensive end. So it throws another wrinkle into the pass rushing competition with Austin Booker and Dominic Robinson. And if he's out of there, is there an even bigger need to go out and get more defensive end depth? Could that push them to sign a free agent even more than what they may have already? And vice versa, could Daniel Hardy provide more depth at linebacker so maybe they don't feel like they need any more at linebacker? That making him a hybrid going in that direction is an interesting wrinkle in here that I hadn't anticipated and was interesting to hear about coming out of OTA's practices. We also got to hear on Wednesday, after Ben Johnson talked, we heard from Grady Jarrett and Tremaine Edmonds and Kevin Byard and Joe Tooney. And I want to go through some of the most important stuff they said on tomorrow's podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, you can always check out the Locked On NFL podcast for more football talk or any of the other Locked On podcasts for your favorite teams in the NBA, NHL, MLB, and college sports. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen today. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.